Imagine getting a phone call at 7 in the morning, and on the other end of the line is Rafael Nadal. Not a text. Not a comment on your Instagram post. An actual phone call from the man who has won 22 Grand Slams, who has bled and fought and clawed his way through the most brutal moments in tennis history, and he is calling you personally to talk about Wimbledon. That was the reality for Alexandra Eala on the morning of June 24, 2026, just hours after a quiet number change on the WTA website turned the entire tennis world upside down. Number 29. Two small words that meant everything. Because Alex Eala had just become the first Filipino, man or woman, in the entire history of the sport, to earn a seated position at a Grand Slam. Let that sink in for a moment. 115 million people in the Philippines, and no one had ever done what this 21-year-old from Quezon City just did. And yet, somehow, the seeding was not even the biggest story of the week. Because Rafael Nadal had something to say, and when Rafael Nadal speaks, the whole sport stops and listens. The story of how we got here did not begin in London. It did not begin in Berlin, where Eala dismantled two of the best players on the planet back-to-back and shocked the tennis world into silence. It began in 2018, in Mallorca, Spain, at a tennis academy built by a legend for the next generation of champions. A 13-year-old girl stepped off a plane with a racket bag, a dream, and absolutely nothing else to lean on. She had left her family behind in Quezon City. She barely spoke the language. She was surrounded by strangers in a foreign country, and she was supposed to compete with some of the most gifted young players in Europe. Most kids in that situation fold. The homesickness alone is enough to send you back on the first flight home. But Alex Eala did not fold. She stayed. She worked. For 5 years, the Rafa Nadal Academy became her second home, shaping her not just as a tennis player but as a person who understood what it truly meant to compete at the highest level. The philosophy at that academy was not complicated. Discipline. Humility. Work ethic. Tony Nadal had built something special there, and the values embedded in those walls were the same values that had carried Rafael himself through a career that most people said was impossible. By 2023, when Eala walked out of those doors as a young professional ready to take on the world, she carried all of that with her. But the connection between Eala and Nadal did not end at graduation. In November 2025, just 1 year after Nadal's emotional retirement from professional tennis, something remarkable happened. Nadal returned to a tennis court for the first time, not for an exhibition, not for a ceremony, but for a private practice session with a 20-year-old Filipina he believed in. The footage from that session circulated quietly at first, and then it exploded. You could see it in his body language. He was relaxed. He was laughing. At one point, Eala hit a forehand clean past him, and instead of the competitive scowl you might expect from a man with 22 majors, Nadal just laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes from genuine pride. He posted about it on Instagram afterward. 1 year later, it felt great to be back on a tennis court. He wrote, "It was great to practice with you, Alex. Next time I will be stronger." And Eala, speaking about the session, could barely contain what it meant to her. She called it something people and young kids can only dream about. She said it was a memory that would last forever. He gave her tips on her forehand. He shared the kind of knowledge that only comes from someone who has lived through everything the sport can throw at you. That session was not just a training hit. It was a passing of the torch, quiet and personal, between a legend stepping away and a young player stepping into the light. Fast forward to June 2026, and everything has accelerated. Eala's run at the Berlin Open was the kind of performance that forces the tennis world to completely reassess what it thought it knew about a player. She walked into that tournament as the world number 35. She walked out as someone who had beaten Elena Rybakina, the world number 2, and former world number 3 Alina Svitolina in consecutive matches. Not lucky wins. Dominant performances. The kind that make coaches in the locker room pull out their tablets and start taking notes on someone they had previously underestimated. Her ranking jumped to number 30. The seeding at Wimbledon followed. And suddenly, the quiet, determined girl from Quezon City, who had spent 5 years learning her craft in Mallorca, was standing on the edge of the biggest tournament in the sport with the whole world paying attention. The WTA website updated at midnight. No ceremony, no press release. Just a number that changed history. And in Mallorca, a retired champion was already picking up his phone. Now here is where the story shifts into something genuinely extraordinary. Because the interview that Rafael Nadal gave in June 2026 was supposed to be routine. A few questions about retirement. A few reflections on his career. The usual conversation you have with a legend who no longer has matches to talk about. But when the topic turned to the next generation of players, something changed in the room. Nadal leaned forward. His posture tightened. And everyone in that room seemed to instinctively understand that what was coming next was not small talk. "There is one player I have been watching," he said. "She is different. She is special. And I think she is going to surprise a lot of people at Wimbledon." The interviewer asked for a name. Nadal did not pause, did not deflect, did not soften it with qualifications. "Alex Eala," he said. Just like that. The man who had won Wimbledon in 2008 and 2010, who had beaten Roger Federer in what is still considered one of the greatest matches ever played, who had faced the absolute best this sport had ever produced across 2 decades of competition, had just named a 21-year-old Filipina as the dark horse of the 2026 championships. The clip hit social media within minutes. Within hours, it had taken on a life of its own. But it was not just the name that made people stop. It was everything Nadal said around it. He talked about watching her fight back from 5-2 down against Sharif in Birmingham. He talked about the 2 rain delays against Mertens, the kind of disruptions that knock lesser players out of their rhythm completely, and how Eala just kept finding a way. He mentioned Roland Garros, a hostile crowd, pressure that would have cracked players with far more experience. And none of it broke her. "I have seen it in her matches," he said. "She has the fight. The refusal to accept that she does not belong." Think about how loaded those words are coming from Rafael Nadal specifically. This is a man whose entire career was built on refusing to accept limitations. His body told him no for years. Injuries, fatigue, the physical punishment of playing the style he played on the surfaces he played on. And he kept saying yes anyway. When Nadal looks at someone and says they have that same refusal, that is not a compliment. That is a recognition. He then broke down her game in a way that showed he had genuinely studied her, not just watched a highlight reel. He talked about her being left-handed, and why that matters more on grass than on any other surface. The angles a lefty creates are different. The serve slides away from right-handed opponents in ways that are almost impossible to read with enough time. The natural slice from a left-hander stays low on grass, and on grass, a low ball is everything. Opponents who want to hit big have nowhere to go. He talked about her court sense, the way she moves forward at the right moments instead of just camping on the baseline and exchanging shots. He said most young players just try to hit the ball as hard as they can. Eala thinks 2 steps ahead. That is the difference between a good player and a dangerous one, and Nadal knows exactly where that line sits. And then, with a smile that told you he knew exactly what he was doing, the interviewer asked if Eala reminded him of anyone. Nadal's answer was one sentence. "She reminds me of a young left-hander I used to know." The room laughed. Of course they did. But beneath the joke was something real. Nadal was not just being generous. He was drawing a direct line between his own identity as a player and what he saw in her. The same lefty angles. The same fighting instinct. The same background. 5 years at his academy absorbing the same philosophy that had built him. He was not handing her a compliment. He was handing her a blueprint, and telling the world she already knew how to use it. The reaction to his declaration was immediate, and it was loud. In the Philippines, the hashtag trended #1 within the hour. Fans who had watched Eala's entire journey, from junior champion to Grand Slam seed, found themselves reading words from the greatest player of his generation and feeling something they had never quite felt before. Validation on the biggest possible stage. Filipino fans flooded social media with the kind of passion that only comes from a country that has been waiting for a moment like this for a very long time. One fan wrote that Nadal did not give compliments lightly, that he had been through the grind and knew what it took, and that when he calls someone dangerous, you believe it. Tennis analysts scrambled to put the endorsement in context. Former players weighed in. Coco Gauff, who had faced Eala multiple times, said she had the game and the heart. Venus Williams, who had partnered with Eala in doubles, said when Nadal speaks about a young player with that kind of conviction, the tennis world should listen. Billie Jean King put it simply, the greatest compliment a young player can receive is the attention of a legend. Now she has to prove him right. And that last sentence is where everything lands. Because endorsements are beautiful. Momentum is real. The belief of a 22-time Grand Slam champion matters. But none of it wins matches. The draw at Wimbledon placed Eala as the 29th seed, opening against Magdalena Frech of Poland in the first round. The path beyond that was not gentle. Aryna Sabalenka and Elena Rybakina both loomed in her half of the draw. Players who hit the ball harder than almost anyone alive. Players who have already won major titles and know exactly what it takes to survive the pressure cooker of the final week at the All England Club. But here is what the doubters keep forgetting. Eala has already beaten Rybakina. Not in a practice set, not in a minor event. In a semi-final in Berlin, with everything on the line, she looked across the net at the reigning Wimbledon champion and found a way. She signed a medical waiver at Birmingham because the WTA questioned her fitness, went out onto that grass court anyway, and won the title. The pattern is not a coincidence. It is who she is. Down 5-2 in the third set and she finds a way. 2 rain delays in the same match and she finds a way. A crowd that wants the other player to win and she finds a way. Nadal did not invent this about her. He recognized it, because he has seen it before, in himself, across 22 majors and a career full of moments where the easy thing would have been to accept the loss and move on. As the eve of Wimbledon arrived, the All England Club began to fill with the kind of energy that only this tournament generates. The grass was immaculate. The tradition was everywhere. And in the stands, among the strawberries and the white clothing and the murmur of a crowd that has seen a century of champions walk these grounds, there were Philippine flags. More than anyone expected. The chant of Laban, the Filipino word for fight, echoed in a place where that word had never been heard before. Not loudly yet. But it was there. And Alex Eala walked onto the practice courts of the All England Club knowing exactly what she carried with her. Not just her racket. Not just her ranking. Not just the memory of Berlin and Birmingham and every match where she refused to fold. She carried the words of a man who had sat across from the greatest players in history and competed until there was nothing left, who had watched her since she was 13 years old and seen something in her that he recognized from his own mirror. The King of Clay had spoken. The dark horse was ready to run. And if the history of this sport has taught us anything, it is that the players who have everything to prove and nothing to lose are the most dangerous players in any draw. Wimbledon 2026 was coming. And for the first time in the history of Philippine tennis, someone was walking through those gates not hoping to survive, but expecting to compete. Laban. Alex. The whole world is watching now.